I watched my daughter-in-law toss a suitcase into the lake. At first, I believed my eyes were lying to me, that loneliness had finally begun to bend reality. But then I heard it. A muffled sound. A cry too faint to be wind. I ran. My feet sank into the marsh, the damp earth gripping my ankles as if the lake itself wanted to keep its secret buried. My fingers trembled as I reached the shoreline. The suitcase bobbed once, twice before beginning to sink. I waded in, the cold biting through my bones. The leather was waterlogged and slick. I dragged it to land and fumbled with the zipper, my nails scraping metal. And when I forced it open, my heart stopped. What I found inside was never meant to be found alive. My name is Yvonne Hayes, and I am 65 years old. I am not a hero, not a heroine from the stories people like to tell when bravery is convenient. I am simply a mother who buried her only son, and a widow who learned how to fold silence into her daily bread. I live on the northern edge of Northwood Lake, in a weathered house with peeling paint and curtains that no longer bother to flutter. People think I live in peace. They see me tending my roses or carrying groceries one bag at a time and assume I am content. But houses, like people, learn to keep their grief indoors. My husband, Raymond, has been gone for 7 years. My son, Matthew, for 16 months. After his funeral, I found his childhood baseball glove in the attic and held it so tightly my fingers cramped. Marissa, his wife, his widow, did not attend the burial. She said goodbyes were for people who believed in endings. I told myself it was her grief speaking, not her heart. But grief eventually softens. Hearts do not. I had not seen Marissa in 4 months. The last time she stepped onto my porch, she would not cross the threshold. She stood outside like a stranger and told me to stop calling. "There is nothing left between us, Yvonne," she said. "Matthew is gone. Let him be gone." I remember nodding, not because I agreed, but because I did not know how to teach her that love does not vanish when breath does. Yet there she was that evening, driving faster than I had ever seen her drive. The lake road is narrow, a ribbon of dirt carved between birch trees. Outsiders avoid it. Locals respect it. I had just poured my tea, black, no sugar, and glanced at the clock, 5:15. The same hour Matthew used to call when he worked late. "I'm heading home, Mom. Leave the porch light on." The house felt particularly hollow that day, as if it were holding its breath. When I heard the engine, I went to the window. Marissa's silver sedan tore through the dust. She stepped out, her shoulders rigid, her hands gripping something heavy. I recognized it before reason allowed me to understand. The brown leather suitcase, the one I had given her on their wedding day. "So you can carry your dreams," I had said. Dreams, what a naive word. She did not hesitate. She did not look around. She swung the suitcase once, twice, 3 times, and released it. The splash echoed like a cracked bell. She turned back to her car, her hair clinging to her face, her movements sharp and unsentimental. I might have stood frozen forever, if not for the sound. So soft, so impossible. Not an animal, not the wind, a cry. My body moved before my mind caught up. I left my cane on the porch railing and ran. The first step hurt. The second nearly buckled me. But I did not stop. Age has a way of teaching you which pain to ignore. By the time I reached the water, the suitcase was drifting, dipping. I waded in, the lake swallowing my calves, my knees, my resolve. The cold stole my breath, but I gripped the handle and pulled. It felt impossibly heavy, as if it carried stones or sins. When I dragged it onto the muddy shore, my hands were shaking so violently I could barely grasp the zipper. It resisted me like a living thing. Then it loosened. I have never told anyone what I whispered at that moment. It was not a prayer. It was a plea. Not to God, but to whatever cruel seam held the world together. Please, please let me be wrong. But I was not wrong. Inside that suitcase was not clothing, nor keepsakes, nor anything that belonged to the dead. It was something painfully alive, fragile, nearly gone. I wish I could tell you I screamed, that I cried out for help. But some shocks steal the voice before they steal the tears. I only remember the feeling of my own heartbeat slamming against my ribs, as though it wanted to leap out and take the baby's place. Yes, a baby, wrapped in a thin, water-soaked blanket, skin pale as wax, lips blue, still, too still. I reached in with hands I did not recognize, hands that had buried a husband, hands that had folded a flag over a coffin. I lifted him, no heavier than a loaf of bread, and pressed him to my chest. For one agonizing second, I believed I was holding death. Then, faint as a sigh, I felt it. Breath. A struggling, desperate, unfinished breath. In that instant, everything in me that had gone quiet since Matthew's death roared back to life. I did not wonder whose child he was. I did not question why Marissa had discarded him. I only knew this. Something unspeakable had been asked of me, because grief had already taken my son, and fate, merciless as ever, had placed his child into my arms. I wish I could tell you that my first instinct was courage. It was not. It was disbelief, the kind that makes your jaw tremble before your knees do, the kind that makes you blink, as if blinking might erase what you have seen. When I stood at the edge of the lake watching that suitcase sink, my teeth began to clatter, not from cold, but from the collision of truth and terror. I had spent years by those waters, listening to the gentle lap against the shore, trusting it as one trusts a familiar lullaby. But that evening, the lake did not sing. It listened. The air was wet, heavy with late autumn frost, and every breath scraped against the back of my throat. My shoes sank into the mud with a sickening pull. The reeds brushed against my legs, whispering secrets I did not wish to hear. Somewhere in that moment, time unraveled. Meadowlarks fell silent. Even the wind seemed to retreat. All that remained was the echo of that cry, soft, fragile, unfinished. I scanned the road, expecting Marissa's car to reappear, expecting her to realize what she had done, to scream, to run back, to fall to her knees and beg the world to stop. But the road was empty. She had vanished as swiftly as she came, leaving behind nothing but tire tracks, a pair of parallel scars pressed into dirt. I should have gone back to the house. I should have called someone, anyone, a neighbor, the sheriff, even a stranger. But there are moments in life when a decision is not made by reason, but by something older, something instinctual, carved deep into bone. I moved forward, each step slow, deliberate. I do not remember feeling fear. I remember feeling something far heavier, recognition, as if I had been walking toward this moment my entire life. The suitcase floated a few yards out, bumping gently against a cluster of rocks. I could see its brass corner catching the dull light of dusk, the same brass I once polished before giving it to Marissa. She had thanked me with a smile that never reached her eyes. "I travel light," she had said. I believed her. The shoreline sloped abruptly. By the second step, icy water swallowed my ankles. A gasp tore through me, unbidden. My reflection wavered on the surface, distorted, spectral. My fingers, stiff and clumsy, reached for the handle. The weight fought me, dragging back, as if something inside clung to the depths. The leather groaned, saturated. I braced my feet, mud filling the creases of my soles, and pulled. With a heave, I brought it onto land. It landed with a hollow thud, expelling a plume of lake water. My breath came in ragged bursts. My heart hammered so loudly I thought it might break through my ribs. I stared at the suitcase, and a single question rose from within me, ancient and uninvited. What if this belongs to my son? Matthew had owned a similar suitcase once, when he studied engineering out of state. I had helped him pack it the night before he left. Folded shirts, a shaving kit, a few of his father's books, a lifetime tucked into leather. For a moment, irrational as it was, I feared I had summoned a ghost. If this suitcase held remnants of him, letters, clothing, forgotten relics, I would not open it. Some wounds must remain stitched. But then I remembered the cry, that faint, impossible cry. My hands, wet and shaking, reached for the zipper. It resisted. Perhaps it knew that life would splinter once opened. I tightened my grip. My thumb pressed into rusted metal. I said nothing aloud, but inside I bargained. If this is a dream, let me wake. If this is madness, let me be blind. But if there is life, dear God, let me have the strength to bear it. The zipper gave way. There are no words in any language that can prepare a soul for the sight of an abandoned child. My body reacted before my mind did. I dropped to my knees. My breath fractured. In that instant, I understood something I had not realized. True horror is not found in monsters, but in the choices of those we once trusted. I reached in, hesitant, disbelieving. The blanket was soaked, clinging to delicate limbs barely larger than my palm. His skin was cold, terribly, unnaturally cold. I pressed my ear to his tiny chest. Nothing. I pressed my cheek to his lips. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then, a thread of breath, weak, trembling, defiant. I looked back toward the road, empty, toward the lake, silent, toward the sky, indifferent. A question surged through me, fierce and merciless. What kind of mother leaves her child to drown? And another followed, softer, more painful. What kind of mother had I been to not see this coming? I pulled him close. His weight, so slight yet infinite, anchored me. Mud seeped into my skirt. The sun dipped lower, glazing the lake in tarnished gold. I had no plan, no clarity, only one truth. Whatever had been set in motion today was not random. It was a reckoning. Carrying him, I staggered back toward my house. Each step was heavier than the last. I felt age seize my bones, but I would not falter, not with him in my arms. As I reached the porch, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. Hair unbound, eyes wild, clothes stained by the lake. Yet there was something else in that reflection, something I had not seen since Matthew was alive. Purpose. I crossed the threshold. The clock in the hallway ticked once, twice. In that silence, I made a vow, not aloud, not in prayer, but in the marrow of my being. If the world had abandoned this child, then I would become his world. I did not rush to call for help. That may sound cruel to anyone who has never held death in their arms, but I had learned through grief that there are moments when the world must pause, when time must be held between two trembling hands before it decides whether to break or to continue. I knelt on the cold floor of my hallway, the child cradled against my chest, my wet clothes clinging to my skin. The suitcase lay open beside me, gaping like a wound. Water pooled around us, seeping into the wood, but I could not move. Not yet. His breath was faint, barely perceptible, an irregular flutter, like a trapped bird. I pressed 2 fingers beneath his nose, terrified of what I would not feel. There it was, a sigh. So fragile I feared my touch might extinguish it. My throat constricted. I had once believed I was finished with motherhood. After Matthew died, I told myself I had no more nurturing left to give, that I had poured every ounce of love into a grave covered in rain-soaked lilies. But at that moment, I begged, silently, fiercely, for this child to live. I did not pray to angels or saints. I prayed to breath itself. Take mine if you must. But leave him a little longer. I knew he could not stay in my arms forever. There was protocol to follow, authority to alert. But first, I needed him to know he had been seen, that someone in this merciless world had witnessed his fight to exist. I pressed him closer, rocking gently as I once rocked my own son through fevers and night terrors. His skin was chilled, tinged with dusk blue, his eyelashes clumped with moisture, yet he did not fully surrender. Life, stubborn and flickering, still clung to him. I rose, limbs heavy, and carried him into the living room. The clock on the mantel struck once. Its hollow chime echoed through the empty house. I placed him on the woolen throw blanket draped across the sofa, one my husband used to rest beneath during winter storms. It still smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco. My hands moved without permission. I fetched towels from the linen cupboard, warm ones folded for guests I no longer had. I wrapped him, layer by layer, careful to keep his face uncovered. His lips quivered. A sound escaped him, not quite a cry, more a question. The telephone sat on the side table, a relic with a coiled cord. I reached for it, dialed 91, then stopped. My finger hovered above the final one. Once I pressed it, everything would change. Questions would come. Accusations, authorities, evidence bags, headlines. A woman finds an infant in a suitcase. I could already hear the suspicion in their tone. Why were you there? What were you doing? Why didn't you call sooner? And then the question that would slice me open. Where is the mother? I set the receiver down. Not yet. I needed one moment, one breath, in which my truth belonged to me alone. I sat on the edge of the sofa, watching the child's chest rise and fall in shallow waves. With each breath he drew, I felt a crack forming within me, the same crack that opened the night the hospital chaplain approached me with condolences instead of hope. Yet this fissure was different, not breaking, a remembering. My son, Matthew, had once been this small. I recalled the night I brought him home. Storming rain, thunder rattling the windows. Raymond had paced the hallway, cradling him awkwardly, afraid to breathe too loudly. "He's so light," he'd whispered, as if he might float away. I laughed then. I had believed in beginnings. I leaned closer to the boy on my sofa. Not mine, yet inexplicably mine. His fingers, wrinkled from the water, curled against the air. I placed my finger beside his. An instinct guided him. He grasped, weakly, imperfectly, but willingly. And in that instant, a vow formed within me, not one of words, but of marrow. If he survived, I would not abandon him to the shadows. A noise startled me, the wind slamming a loose shutter against the window frame. I jolted, clutching my chest. The world outside had grown darker, clouds massing over the lake, swallowing the last of dusk. Somewhere beneath those waters lay the place where he had nearly vanished without a name. I shuddered. I rose again, soaked skirts heavy around my legs, and lit the fireplace. Flame caught slowly, then bloomed. Firelight spilled across the floor, brushing his cheeks with a faint glow. I watched as a hint of color returned, pale pink, faint, but undeniable. Why did she do it? The question prowled inside me. Marissa. She had held this child in her body. She had felt his heartbeat beneath her own ribs. How could she cast him away like refuse? I wanted to condemn her, to name her monster, yet I could not summon hatred, only horror. Because somewhere under all her choices, there was a truth I did not yet know, and truth, however ugly, demands to be understood. The clock chimed again. Time had resumed its march, indifferent to my reckoning. I knelt beside the sofa, brushing damp hair from his forehead. "You are not alone," I whispered, unsure whether I was speaking to him or to myself. I reached for the phone. This time I completed the call. When the dispatcher's voice answered, clipped and procedural, I did not tremble. "There is a child," I said. "A baby. I found him near Northwood Lake." She asked for my name. I gave it. She asked if he was breathing. I placed my palm over his chest. A flutter. "Yes," I said, "but you must hurry." Sirens pierced the night minutes later, splitting the hush. Red and blue lights pulsed against my windows. I opened the door and stood silently, the child wrapped in wool. Paramedics approached, questions already on their tongues. I raised a hand, not in defiance, but in plea. "Please," I said, "take him first." They lifted him with professional efficiency, checking vitals, placing oxygen. One of them, a younger woman with kind eyes, glanced at me. "Did you pull him from the lake?" I nodded. "Ma'am," she said gently, "you may have saved his life." But I did not feel like a savior. I felt like a witness. As the ambulance doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of him, tiny, fragile, swaddled in strangers' hands, a life that had almost slipped through the cracks of this indifferent earth. I stood in my doorway, drenched and shaking, watching the lights fade into darkness. I did not cry. I simply whispered the truth I had never dared to admit. I once believed I would never mother another soul. I was wrong. For somewhere between the lake and my living room, something returned to me. Not hope, but responsibility. I rode in the front seat of the ambulance, though I do not remember climbing in. My hands were wrapped in a blanket, yet I could still feel the chill of the lake clinging to my bones. The child, swaddled and wired to machines, lay behind me under sterile lights. I could not see him, only hear the steady beep of a monitor fighting to keep time. I stared ahead, at the dark road unraveling before us, and tried to breathe. Grief teaches you how to survive silence, but this was different. This silence demanded an answer. When we reached St. Agnes Medical Center, a team of nurses and doctors rushed him through double doors, while another nurse held me back. "Ma'am, we need your information." Her voice was calm, rehearsed. I recited my name, my address, the facts of my existence, details I had never felt so detached from. I wanted to shout about his condition instead. He's alive. Check his lungs. Warm his body. Do not let him slip away again. But my mouth refused to betray my fear. I have lived long enough to know that fear is a luxury for those who still have choices. A police officer arrived while I waited in the fluorescent-lit corridor. He was young, with a face too stern for his age. His badge identified him as Officer Callahan. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, pulling out a notepad, "I need to ask you some questions." I nodded. He did not invite me to sit, so I stood. "You stated that you witnessed a woman disposing of the suitcase. Did you recognize her?" My throat tightened. "I believe it was my daughter-in-law, Marissa Hayes." "Believe?" His pen hovered. "You're not certain." "I saw her car," I replied, "and her build, the way she moved. But you did not see her face." He said it gently, but doubt dripped from every word. I inhaled slowly. "No," I admitted, "I did not." He wrote something down. Could anyone else have been driving her vehicle? The question struck me harder than I expected. Could someone else have been there? Could loneliness have twisted my sight? The memory replayed in my mind. Marissa's silver sedan, the slam of the trunk, the force of the throw. Yet my certainty trembled. "I suppose it is possible," I whispered. He looked up, studying me. "Mrs. Hayes, is it possible you're mistaken?" There it was, the doorway to accusation. I stood in it, steady. "I know what I heard," I said quietly. "There was a child in that suitcase." He didn't reply. He didn't need to. I could see the question forming in his mind. "But how did you know to open it? Why did you go to the lake at that exact moment?" As he excused himself, telling me to remain available, I found a chair in the waiting area. My clothes were still damp. I could smell the lake water dried into the fibers. A nurse offered me water. I thanked her and held the cup, untouched. Across from me sat a mother cradling a toddler with a fever. She rocked him gently, humming. I looked away. Minutes bled into hours. I do not know when Officer Callahan returned, but he did not come alone. A woman accompanied him, Detective Harper, older, composed, eyes sharp as glass. She took the seat beside me. "Mrs. Hayes," she began, "we need to understand everything that happened tonight, from the beginning." I told them. About the car, the suitcase, the cry. She folded her hands. "Did you approach the car?" "No." "Did you attempt to stop the woman?" "I was too far." She nodded, not writing, simply absorbing. Then, with a voice softened by empathy, she asked, "Mrs. Hayes, do you have any reason to believe that your daughter-in-law would harm a child?" The question emptied me. Marissa, my son's wife, the woman who once stood in my kitchen, stirring sugar into her tea, laughing at something Matthew had said. Could she? Had I missed something? Or had grief rewritten her image in my mind? "I don't know," I answered truthfully. Detective Harper leaned back. "You understand we have to consider every possibility." She meant, including you. A tremor traveled through me, not anger, not an insult, a recognition. People fear what they cannot explain, and an elderly woman pulling an infant from a suitcase was a riddle no one knew how to solve. I rose suddenly. "I need to see him," I said. She didn't stop me. I found his room in the neonatal unit. Through the window, I saw him, tiny, encased in tubes and warmth. A nurse adjusted his IV with the tenderness of someone who believes every life is worth saving. I pressed my palm to the glass. What if I'm wrong? The thought arrived without warning. What if it wasn't Marissa? What if I accused an innocent woman because I could not face a darker truth? That evil is not always someone we already distrust? I closed my eyes and listened to my heartbeat, a slow, deliberate rhythm, like the ticking of Raymond's old pocket watch I kept beside my bed. That watch had survived wars, storms, and funerals. It had never lied to me. I opened my eyes. I had seen what I had seen. I had heard what I had heard. A doubt born of fear is not the same as a doubt born of deceit. I would accept uncertainty, but I would not accept silence. When I returned to the waiting room, Detective Harper stood. "We will need a full statement in the morning," she said. "For now, go home. Rest." Rest. As if rest were something one could choose. I nodded. On my way out, I passed the emergency entrance just as rain began to fall. The pavement glistened. The sky had opened without warning. I paused beneath the awning, pulling my coat tight. And for the first time that night, a single, unforgiving thought surfaced. What if she saw me? Some part of me knew. This was not the end of what I had witnessed. It was the beginning. I returned to the hospital the following morning just after dawn. The corridors were quieter then, emptied of the night's urgencies, filled instead with the hush of waiting. I carried a thermos of black tea, not for comfort, but as a reminder of control, something warm to hold when everything else felt cold. I asked the nurse at the desk about the child, though I no longer needed to ask. I already felt the weight of him somewhere inside me, as if my body had revived the instinct to listen for a newborn's breath. "He's stable," she said, still critical, but stable. She paused, as if choosing her next words carefully. "The detectives are here. They'd like to speak with you again." I nodded, prepared for questions I had already answered, but this time they did not meet me in the hallway. They led me to a small, windowless room, sterile, enclosed, lit by a single fluorescent panel that flickered every few seconds. A table sat at the center, steel legs bolted to the floor. 2 chairs, one already occupied. Detective Harper sat across from me, files stacked neatly at her elbow. Officer Callahan remained standing by the door. Neither spoke until I took my seat. The air tasted metallic. "Mrs. Hayes?" Harper began, her voice steady but lined with something gentler than before. "We received preliminary results from the infant's DNA panel." I stilled. "DNA?" She opened a folder. "It's standard procedure in cases involving abandoned minors. We compare DNA with national records, hospital birth logs, and if necessary, familial samples." I waited. She met my eyes. "The child shares a 25% DNA match with you." The words did not land. They hovered between us like fragile glass. "You are biologically related," she continued. "He is your grandson." My breath caught, sharp as shattered bone. For a moment, the room tilted. Time bent. Grandson. A word I had never imagined would return to my life. A word wrapped in equal parts mercy and betrayal. "My son," I whispered. "Matthew. He never had children." Officer Callahan shifted. Detective Harper clasped her hands. "It appears he did, Mrs. Hayes. A child he may not have known existed." I felt my pulse thrum wildly in my ears. No, if Matthew had fathered a child, he would have told me. He would have prepared. The word felt feeble. What mother expects her child to leave behind a child of his own? "Is there any possibility," Harper asked carefully, "that his partner, Marissa, concealed a pregnancy?" The world narrowed to a single point. A face. Marissa's face. Detached. Polished. Unreadable. I stared at the table. "If she did," I said, "she never spoke of it, not to me." "Not to anyone," my mind added. Detective Harper slid another paper across the table. "We will confirm paternity through secondary testing, but given the existing match, the statistical likelihood is conclusive." My hand remained on my lap, motionless. I did not reach for the paper. I did not need ink to validate blood. "He has Matthew's eyes," I murmured, surprising myself. I had not consciously studied the child's features, yet I knew. There had been a flicker, dark, uncertain, beneath his lashes when I held him. a resemblance unnamed until now. Callahan stepped forward. "Mrs. Hayes, are you certain you saw Marissa at the lake?" I looked up. His face was no longer stern, but searching, hoping I would retract, hoping this nightmare could be rewritten as a stranger's crime. "I did not see her face," I repeated. "But I saw her car, her posture, the way she moved. But now," Harper pressed softly, "knowing what you know, could your grief have influenced what you believed you saw?" The question sliced deeper than accusation. It was an invitation to doubt myself, to doubt memory, to doubt everything that tethered me to truth. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "Are you asking?" I said slowly. "Whether I invented a villain?" Silence. Grief can twist a person, yes, but it does not transplant faces, it does not conjure license plates, and it does not drown infants in suitcases. I straightened. "I may have hesitated to speak ill of her before, but I will not hesitate now. If Marissa hid this child, if she left him to die, she did so knowing he was Hayes' blood." "Why would she do that?" Callahan asked, almost to himself. I did not answer immediately, because the truth was worse than malice. It was indifference. Detective Harper closed the folder. "We will locate her," she said, "and we will question her. Until then, the child will remain in protective custody." Protective custody. A sterile phrase. A human life suspended. They dismissed me with protocol. I stood, suddenly older. When I stepped into the hallway, the world felt altered, tilted slightly off its axis, nursing a secret only I carried. I walked to the viewing window of the neonatal ward. The boy lay in his incubator, wires like fragile vines clinging to his limbs. His chest rose and fell, barely. A nurse passed behind me, paused. "You can go in, if your family," she said gently. Family. I entered. The scent of antiseptic and warmed milk lingered in the air. I approached slowly, not wanting to frighten him, though he could not yet see me. I laid my palm against the glass of the incubator. "Matthew," I whispered, though I was not speaking to the child. "You had a son." My reflection stared back at me, creased, wearied, but unbroken. "I once said I did not want to be a mother again," I confessed under my breath, "but fate has made me one, whether I asked for it or not." In that room, beneath the relentless hum of machines, I made another vow. "You will not disappear, not like he did, not while I draw breath." I turned toward the door, ready to face the storm that would surely follow, for I was no longer merely a witness. I had become an heir to the truth. I returned home that evening with a silence inside me that felt heavier than the suitcase I had pulled from the lake. The air in the house was stale, as if it had held its breath for years. I left my coat on, unsure whether I had the strength to remove it. The officers had told me to rest. But rest is a luxury reserved for those who can forget. I could not anymore. I made tea, though I never drank it. I simply needed something to hold, something warm. Standing at the kitchen counter, I stared at the empty chair Matthew once sat in during late-night talks, when he still believed the world was something he could fix with logic and patience. He used to leave his notebooks scattered across this very table, scribbled with architectural sketches and unsent letters. He believed in planning. He believed in preparation. I walked slowly toward the study, the smallest room in the house, barely more than a closet. It was where I kept what remained of him, his belongings, boxed and sealed, not to be discarded, not to be touched, a museum of a life interrupted. I opened the closet door and pulled out the wooden trunk that held his things. My hands hesitated on the latch. I had not opened it since the week after his funeral. Back then, I had searched for a sign, anything to explain the accident. I found nothing. Or perhaps I had not known what to search for. This time I did. I lifted the lid. Inside were his worn jackets, his engineering textbooks, the wristwatch with a cracked leather strap, and beneath it, an object I did not remember placing there, a small brown leather notebook, weathered, the edges frayed. I frowned. It was not something I recognized. Matthew had always preferred digital journals. Why would he keep a handwritten one? My fingers trembled as I reached for it. The cover creaked as I opened it. His handwriting greeted me. Steady, slanted, familiar. The first pages contained ordinary musings about work, deadlines, sleepless nights. But then, halfway through, the words shifted. The tone changed. I think something is wrong. I felt my breath catch. She avoids me when I ask questions. She changes topics when I mention children. I found a test. Positive. She said it wasn't hers, but I know what I saw. I read on, my vision blurring. If something happens to me, Mom must know. I don't trust her to keep the baby. She says she's not ready. But it's more than that. There's a coldness I can't explain, a calculation. My grip tightened until the leather bit into my palm. I changed my beneficiary. Everything goes to the child now. Not her. She doesn't know yet. If she finds out before the birth, I don't know what she'll do. But someone must protect this child. There it was. The echo I had heard in the hospital. Someone must protect this child. I closed the journal and pressed it to my chest as if I could pull my son back into being. The house groaned with the evening wind. I sank to the floor, knees drawn to my chest, and let the truth bury me. Matthew had known. He had seen the storm before it arrived, and like any good son, he had tried to shield me from it, even in death. For so long, I had blamed fate. I told myself the universe was cruel, that randomness had stolen him. But now I saw it clearly. My son had not died by chance. He had died in fear, in dread, and I had not been there to hear him ask for help. Guilt, like a blade, pressed against my ribs. He tried to warn me. I rose, clutching the journal. I walked to the fireplace and set it gently on the mantel, beside Raymond's pocket watch. The ticking felt louder now, as though time itself demanded I act. I went to my desk and retrieved an old envelope. Inside were letters from the life insurance company, policy transfers, documents naming Matthew's beneficiary. I had assumed they were for Marissa. I had never opened them. My hands trembled as I tore one open. The beneficiary was not Marissa. It was listed only as, to my born or unborn child. He had known. He had prepared. A rush of clarity washed through me. Marissa had not abandoned a stranger's child. She had tried to erase an heir, to sever blood from legacy, to cleanse her life of consequence. I did not weep. I could not. What tears remain after a heart has broken twice within the same lifetime? Instead, I felt something quieter, fiercer, resolve. Matthew, I whispered to the journal, I hear you now. Outside, the wind howled across the lake, a primal sound, a warning. Inside, my home no longer felt empty. It felt haunted, with truth, with duty, with unfinished vows. I placed the journal beside the letters and looked around the room. Everything appeared unchanged, yet everything had changed. This was no longer a house of grief. It had become a house of guardianship, and I, who once believed I had no strength left for motherhood, I had just been called to one final act. Someone must protect this child. I would answer. I arrived at the courthouse with the journal tucked inside my handbag, close enough to feel its weight each time I took a step. It was not evidence yet, not in a legal sense, but it was proof. Proof that Matthew had foreseen danger. Proof that I had not imagined the coldness in Marissa's eyes. The registrar instructed me to wait outside Family Services, room 204. The hallway smelled of paper and disinfectant. A mother scolded a child across from me while a father in a worn suit rehearsed a statement under his breath. I wondered, briefly, what they saw when they looked at me. A gray-haired woman clutching a handbag, shoulders slightly stooped. A grandmother, not a guardian. When my name was called, I entered a room where everything was designed to evaluate. Bleached walls, file cabinets, a table set with 2 chairs, one already occupied. Across from me sat a woman in her late 30s, neatly dressed, expression unreadable. She introduced herself as Ms. Wilkins, Child Protective Services. She gestured for me to sit. I did. I reviewed the initial report. She began, opening a folder. You found the infant near Northwood Lake. You reported it. Paramedics confirmed hypothermia and near drowning. She paused. And you believe the child is your biological grandson? I inhaled carefully. I don't just believe. The hospital confirmed it. DNA. She nodded, though without reaction. DNA confirmation does establish biological relations. However, legal guardianship is a separate matter. I expected that. I knew enough of the world to understand that blood does not automatically entitle one to responsibility, especially not someone like me. She studied me. Not unkindly, but analytically. Mrs. Hayes, you are 65 years old. I held her gaze. Yes. Do you live alone? Yes. Do you have any medical conditions we should be aware of? My chart is available to you. She made a note. Are you currently employed? No. So, you are retired. Widowed, I corrected gently, though she did not ask. There was a pause, brief but heavy. Raising a newborn requires extraordinary physical and emotional stamina. Midnight feedings, medical appointments, schooling. Are you prepared for that? I could have spoken of the nights I stayed awake through fevers, the years I balanced work and motherhood, the grief that nearly stole my will to live. But I did not. I simply said, yes. She leaned forward. Why? It was not hostility. It was protocol. Why would a woman of my age seek not only custody, but the burdens that accompany it? I answered with quiet honesty, because he was left to die, and I will not leave him again. Her pen stilled. She closed the folder. We will need to conduct a full evaluation, home inspections, psychological assessment, background screening, mandated parenting courses. I understand. You may be required to foster temporarily before permanent custody is considered. I understand. There is also the matter of the child's mother. If she resurfaces, she may contest. She left him in a suitcase, I said, not with anger, with fact. Ms. Wilkins exhaled softly. I am not disputing your account, but until the court determines abandonment or criminal liability, she retains maternal rights. I nodded, peaceful on the surface, storming within. She handed me a stack of applications, legal terminology, statement forms, financial disclosures, medical clearances. You will need to sign these, she said. I did not argue. I signed. Days turned into weeks. Each morning, I traveled to the courthouse, the clinic, the agency. I stood in line. I answered questions. I provided documents. I underwent examinations by strangers who scribbled judgments in margins. Some looked at me with pity, others with doubt, a few with veiled irritation. Parenting at your age is highly irregular, a counselor remarked during a required interview. So is finding your grandchild in a suitcase, I replied. She said nothing further. There were nights when exhaustion clung to my bones like damp cloth. I would sit on the edge of my bed, hands limp in my lap, wondering if dignity was worth this dissection. But then I would recall the steady rise and fall of his chest in the hospital incubator, the grip of his tiny hand around my finger, and I remembered, someone must protect this child. So I rose each morning, and I continued. The first home inspection took place on a Thursday. 2 women arrived unannounced, one in her 50s, kind-eyed, the other younger, rigid. They examined every room, measured windows, checked alarms, note the absence of child-proof locks. You'll need safety gates here, one said, pointing to the staircase. And outlet covers, added the other. I nodded. I wrote it down. Not humiliation. Preparation. As they left, the older woman lingered. Mrs. Hayes, she said quietly, this process is difficult. Many give up. I met her eyes. Many have the choice to. She seemed to understand. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings regarding Marissa began to stir. She remained missing. News outlets had not yet learned of the infant. The police informed me they were investigating her disappearance, not as a suspect, but initially as a potential victim. That was the world's first instinct, a missing woman, not a missing conscience. One detective asked, is it possible she suffered a breakdown, postpartum psychosis? I considered it. Is it possible? Yes. Is it possible? I did not know. Only she knew the truth of her darkness. Moral conflict seeped into my quiet hours. Am I condemning her? Or am I clinging to an image of guilt so that I do not have to face a more terrifying thought, that some horrors have no explanation? But each time doubt circled me, I returned to a single, immovable truth. She left him. The first time I was permitted supervised visitation at the hospital, I arrived early. Nurses recognized me now, not as the woman from the news that had not yet broken, but as the silent figure who kept vigil. They allowed me to sit beside his crib. His breathing was stronger. His eyes opened briefly. I whispered, "They don't know you yet, but I do." He did not cry. He simply looked at me, calm and aware, as if he recognized something. Not me. Perhaps the quiet, the kind that waits, the kind that does not leave. A nurse approached softly. "Does he have a name?" "Not yet," I answered. "Well," she smiled gently, "he seems to know yours." On my way out, I passed a bulletin board in the hallway, lined with pamphlets on child welfare. One headline caught my eye, "Why We Fight for the Voiceless." I paused. Then, without ceremony, I whispered aloud, "For myself, for Matthew, for the child. I am not fighting to be needed." I straightened my coat. I am fighting because no one else stayed. I had just returned from the courthouse when the phone rang. Unknown number. The sound sliced through the kitchen like a blade, precise, metallic, unforgiving. I stood very still and let it ring twice more, long enough for my pulse to settle, long enough to decide that fear would not be the first one to answer. I reached for the receiver and pressed it to my ear. "Mrs. Hayes." The voice was low, steady. A veneer of calm stretched over something jagged. "Who is this?" "You know who this is." The room shrank around me. The clock on the wall ticked louder, as if time itself wanted to listen. I glanced at the small recorder I kept in a drawer, an old habit from caring for Raymond during his illness, when doctor's instructions had to be captured word for word. I slid the drawer open with my free hand, pressed the red button, and set the device on the counter. "Speak clearly," I said. "You are on a poor connection." A soft laugh, more breath than sound. "It is not the connection. It is your age." I let the insult pass. "Marissa." A pause. Then, with the cold relief of ice water against skin, "Yes." My shoulders loosened, not from comfort, but from the end of uncertainty. Fear is a door that swings on its hinges until someone either opens it or nails it shut. She had opened it for me. "What do you want?" I asked. "That child is mine," she said. "You have no right." I looked at the window over the sink. The lake lay still beyond the birches, a sheet of hammered pewter beneath a sky the color of old bone. I saw the briefest tremor in my reflection, not weakness, only recognition of the moment I had expected since the incubator's first steady beep. "You left him," I said. "He was safe." "In a suitcase." "Containment is not abandonment," she replied, and I heard the ridiculousness of the sentence even as she spoke it. I had to think. I needed time. "You left him in the water." Silence, then a lift of breath that might have been irritation. "Stop dramatizing. You have always loved drama. The widow by the lake, the grieving mother who refuses to move on. You will not use my son to dress your loneliness." I realized then that she had not called to ask. She had called to reignite the old power she once wielded in our family with shrugged indifference and poised detachment. She thought the past version of me would answer, the woman who over-explained, who filled silences with apologies. She did not know the lake had carved a different woman out of me. "You are correct," I said. "I will not use him for anything. I will protect him." She exhaled a quick laugh. Protect him from them, from his mother, from neglect, from danger, from the kind of calculation that measures a human life and inconvenience. Her voice sharpened. "Listen to me. If you bring the courts into this, you will regret it. I have friends. I have receipts. I can say you took him. I can say you fabricated that story at the lake because you wanted to punish me for moving on from Matthew." I let the threat hang without reply. The recorder's small red eye glowed on the counter. In its presence, words acquired weight. They were no longer weapons thrown in shadow, but stones that would sink or float depending on their truth. She filled the silence. "He is mine by law." "By biology," I said, "not by care." "And what are you, Yvonne? A midwife of grief, a curator of memories. The state will not hand you a newborn because you keep a tidy kitchen and a righteous tone. You are not the state." "No," she said, softening, as if she had remembered an older strategy. "I am the only person who knows how to make his life easy. Money, preschool connections, travel, opportunity. You will give him arthritis and bedtime stories about how the world used to be. I will give him the world he deserves." The old me might have argued the morality of ease. The old me might have begged her to meet me halfway. The woman who had dragged a suitcase from the lake simply laid a new plank over the chasm between us. "You called to declare ownership," I said. "I will speak plainly. You do not own him. Children are not property. Spare me the philosophy. Meet me at the old boathouse tomorrow at dusk. Bring him. We will discuss terms." "No," I said. The word surprised even me with its simplicity. It did not rise from anger. It arrived from a place I did not know I had. A quiet chamber marked authority. It stood on its own feet. It required nothing to lean against. Marissa went still. "You think this is your choice?" "I know it is my responsibility," I said, "and I do not negotiate in the dark." She drew a breath through her teeth. "You are making a mistake." "I have made many," I said. "This will not be one." Her tone shifted again, searching for footholds. "Do you believe I wanted him to die?" "I believe you wanted to erase him, yeet," I answered, "which is a slower death and more convenient." "You always resented me," she said. "That is untrue," I replied. "I mistrusted you. It is different." The truth landed between us with a clean sound, like a knife returning to its sheath. I heard her swallow. For a moment, I imagined the room she was sitting in, an empty rental with a mattress on the floor, a bathroom mirror taped at the corners, a suitcase that no longer floated because there was nothing left to carry. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps she was dialing from a friend's kitchen, barefoot, hair-brushed, a mug of coffee growing cold because conscience curdles appetite. The setting did not matter. The words did. "You cannot keep him," she said finally. "The system will devour you." I thought of the courthouse, of the forms that asked whether I could run up a flight of stairs without stopping, whether I had anyone under my care, whether I planned to move in the next 12 months. I thought of the inspectors measuring windows and the counselors searching my face for signs of denial. I thought of the nurse who had asked if he had a name yet, and the minute his eyes had found mine as if he recognized the pattern of quiet around him. "I am not asking the system to spare me," I said. "I am asking it to see him." "You truly believe you can outlast me," she murmured. "This is not about endurance," I said. "It is about alignment. I am aligned with his survival. You are aligned with your comfort." She snorted. "You always did love sentences that sound like Bible verses." "I love sentences that carry truth without needing to shout." Another silence, a small war fought in held breath. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its lacquer. "If I come forward," she asked, "and I say I made a mistake, will you let me see him?" "Yes," I said. "If you tell the truth to the authorities and the court allows visitation, I will not stand in the way. You will not keep him from me out of spite." "I will not keep him from you at all," I said, "but I will keep him safe from you if I must." Her control cracked. "You cursed the old woman." "No," I said. "I am a woman who has outlived her fear." The clock on the wall struck the quarter hour. Outside, the birches writhed without sound. The lake remained a held breath. She tried once more. "Meet me," she said softer. "No police. We will resolve this together. You can hand him to me quietly. You can go back to your life. No one will know you were ever involved." "There is no life to go back to," I answered. "There is only one I am building now. You will regret this." "Perhaps," I said, "but I will not regret standing where he needed me." She spoke a series of words I will not dignify with memory. Then the line clicked dead. The house listened for the ring that did not return. I stood at the counter, looking down at the recorder. The small red light still burned. I pressed stop. I made 2 copies, one for law enforcement, one secured in the lockbox where I kept the deeds and the letters that had begun to mean more than air. When I called Detective Harper, I did not allow my voice to tremble. "She called," I said. "She demanded, she threatened, she requested a meeting. I declined. I have the recording." "Do not meet her," the detective said, "under any circumstances." "I am done meeting danger where it chooses," I replied. "It will now meet me where the light is." I hung up and stood at the window until night folded over the lake. The glass held my reflection, the same face that had watched a suitcase sink, the same hands that had dragged it back from the water's mouth. But something had shifted. The tilt of the jaw, the set of the shoulders, the way my eyes held their own light. For months, I had moved as if I owed the world an apology for surviving. Now the apology had been replaced with a statement I did not need to say aloud. I am here. I am not negotiable. In bed, the house felt less like a museum of endings and more like a harbor under a storm advisory. I set the recorder on the nightstand beside Raymond's pocket watch and Matthew's journal. The 3 objects formed a steady constellation: time, truth, testimony. Outside, wind combed the birches until the branches ceased arguing and learned to sway. Somewhere in the neonatal ward, a small chest lifted in rhythm with machines and something stronger than machines. I let my breathing match that unseen rhythm. Before sleep found me, I rehearsed the only response I would carry into every conversation that came next, to the state, to the court, to Marissa if she called again. I do not argue. I do not beg. I sign where needed. I stand where necessary, and I protect what the dark tries to keep. I chose to meet her, not because I believed in negotiation. That had long passed. I went because there are moments in life when silence must be broken, not with anger, but with presence. The kind of presence that does not tremble or plead, the kind that simply refuses to vanish. The lake was still when I arrived. Northwood. The same gray water that once reflected a floating suitcase, the same bank where mud closed around my ankles and breath crystallized in disbelief. I stood there early, long before sunset, watching thin sheets of ice drift like fragments of broken mirrors. I traced the shoreline with my eyes, memorizing each curve as if mapping an old wound. I had no child in my arms, no evidence in my bag, only the recorder in my coat pocket. Turned off. This was not for the police. This was for us. Marissa arrived without sound. I did not hear footsteps. I only sensed the shift, the slight tremor of air, the instinctive knowledge that another heartbeat had entered the field of mine. When I turned, she was there, wrapped in a dark coat, hair severely pulled back, no makeup, no tremor. She looked like someone who slept with one eye open. "You came," she said. I nodded once. "You called." Her jaw tightened. "I didn't think you would come alone, and I no longer come as someone afraid." The wind passed between us, lifting strands of her hair loose from control. She crossed her arms, her eyes never leaving mine. "Where is he?" she asked. "Safe." That wasn't the question. It is the only answer. She took one step closer. "You think this is over because you have him in your house? A crib and a rocking chair don't erase blood. I carried him. I bled for him. And you sealed him." She blinked. "Once, slowly. You still cling to that image. Me, a monster by the lake." I said nothing. Not because I lacked response, but because silence was now my compass, and I had learned that words placed too hastily can drown truth. She continued. "You have always needed villains, haven't you? Someone to blame so that your grief has a face." "You misunderstand," I said quietly. "Blame is heavy. I learned long ago not to carry what I cannot bury." She hesitated, confusion flashing across the iron of her expression. She had expected my anger, not my resolve. She turned then, looking out at the lake. "Do you know," she said, How quiet it was that night. No lights, no witnesses, only the water, like it could wash everything away. I did not move. She went on. When I opened the trunk and saw him wrapped in that blanket, She stopped, exhaled. I don't expect you to understand. You are correct, I said. I do not. She turned back to me. I wanted silence, just for a moment, just one moment without obligation, without screaming, without eyes on me. I studied her, the lines of exhaustion, the hollowness beneath defiance. Then why call me? I asked. Why reach for the one person who would never allow forgetting? Her eyes darkened. Because I need you to understand something. I could have disappeared. Take him, and you would never have known. But I didn't. I left him. For you. Don't you see? You were meant to find him. It was an invocation, twisted and desperate, attempting to sanctify cruelty as destiny. I stepped closer, not with menace, but with finality. You do not get to rewrite what you abandoned, I said. You do not get to cover terror with intention. She flinched, then steadied. I am his mother. Then why am I the one standing here? She inhaled sharply, fury igniting. You think you've won. I have not entered a contest. Then what is this? She demanded, voice cracking. A test? A confession? Do you want me to say I'm evil? Will that make you whole? I looked at the water, then back at her. I don't need apologies or confessions. I only need clarity. And what, she hissed, is clarity to you? This, I said. She waited. I pointed, not to the water, but to the absence between us. That you chose convenience over courage, and I choose the opposite. She froze. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse her of murder, though I could have. My words were not chains. They were mirrors, and there is no armor against one's own reflection. She swallowed. Her breath faltered. You believe you can save him from everything. You can't. You will die before he grows. Then I will die having tried to protect, not erase. Her composure flickered. The first true crack. Wind rolled off the lake, cold and sharp. We stood, two women, both weathered by grief, both shaped by different definitions of survival. One willing to sever, one willing to remain. Finally, she whispered, I am not finished. I know, I said, but neither am I. She stepped back, not in fear, in realization, the kind that seeps, not strikes. This isn't over, she said. No, I replied. It is merely honest. She looked away first, not because she yielded, but because, for the first time, she could not gather my silence into her control. She walked toward the tree line. No threats, no screams, only a final sentence tossed over her shoulder. You don't deserve him. I let the words meet the air, then fall. He is not an object to be deserved, said. He is a life to be safeguarded. But she was already gone. I remained until dusk dissolved into night, until the surface of the water remembered again how to keep its secrets. When I finally turned to leave, I did not look back. The lake had taken enough. Days passed after our meeting by Northwood Lake, and though she had disappeared back into whatever corner she'd found, I felt no relief. Not because I feared her return, fear had long since curdled into something else, but because I knew the storm was not in her footsteps, it was in her silence. Then, one afternoon, Detective Harper called. We found her. She didn't say where. She didn't say how. Only that Marissa had been taken into custody without resistance, and that I might be asked to come in, not as a witness to a crime, but as something else. I agreed. The station was quieter than I expected. No flashing lights, no shouting, just paperwork and tired faces. They led me to a narrow observation room. Through the glass, I saw her. Marissa. No handcuffs, no hysteria. Just a woman seated at a metal table, fingers folded, eyes fixed not on the law, not on her accusers, but on a crack in the tile floor, as though she were watching herself fall through it. The door opened. She asked to speak to you, the officer said. You're not required to. I will. They escorted me inside and left. The door clicked softly shut. She did not look up. Not immediately. I studied her, the sharpness of her features hollowed, the lines around her mouth not drawn from crying, but from a prolonged refusal to feel anything at all. Finally, she said, "I thought you wouldn't come." "I came because you asked," I said, "not because I owe you answers." She nodded once, accepting the terms. "I won't drag this out. I know what they want: confession, motive, remorse." She turned her gaze toward me. "I have none to give." Her voice was not cruel. It was vacant. "I didn't call you here for guilt," she said. "I called you for the truth." I waited. She exhaled, steady and tired. "I never wanted to be a mother." There it was, stripped of disguise, not screamed, not justified, simply placed on the table like a shard of broken glass. She continued, eyes unblinking. "Louis did. He loved the idea. I tolerated it. He talked about building a future, a legacy. I felt nothing." Her fingers traced the edge of the table. "When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked, not because I was afraid for the child, but because I was afraid for myself." "You hid it," I said. "I performed it," she corrected. "I attended appointments. I nodded. I folded tiny clothes. I rehearsed how to smile." She swallowed. "But when he changed the will, when he put everything in the child's name, I understood. He was replacing me before I even had a chance to run." "So you ended them both," I said, not as an accusation, as a fact. She did not flinch. "I considered adoption, abandonment, hospital, but each option left a thread. Each thread could lead back to me. I didn't want a child to grow old and wonder why his mother didn't love him. Better for him not to live than to live unloved." I felt no rage, only a deep, hollow grief. Not for her, but for the life she had never permitted herself to witness. "He was alive," I said. "You sealed him breathing." She looked at me, and for a split second, I saw not guilt, not fear, but bewilderment. I don't know why he was alive. I don't know why he cried. I thought I had done it properly. I drew a breath. "He cried because survival is louder than despair." She looked down again. "Maybe." A silence followed, not tense, not charged, just the acknowledgement of a truth neither law nor vengeance could fully touch. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said. "I don't want it. I don't regret what I did." "I know," I replied. She lifted her head then, and there it was, the true collapse. Not screaming, not shaking, just the quiet acceptance of a life emptied by choice. Her eyes were dry. "I am not a monster," she said. "No," I answered. "You are worse." She blinked but did not speak. "Monsters feel hunger," I continued. "They know they devour, but emptiness feels nothing at all." Something shifted behind her gaze, not pain, but comprehension. The recognition that what she called strength, the world would name void. "Do you think I can be fixed?" she asked. "No," I said truthfully. "I do not think you are broken. I think you were never built for tenderness." She leaned back, weary. "Then let them lock me away." "They will," I said, "but that won't be your prison." She studied me. "What will be?" "Memory," I said. "You will remember that he lived, that he breathed despite you, that your ending did not end him." A flicker, barely there, but I saw it. She looked away toward the crack in the tile. "Leave," she said at last. "I have nothing left to say." I stood. I collected my coat, paused. "You are right," I said. "You were never meant to be a mother." She did not look at me, but I was. I left. In the hallway, Detective Harper asked, "Did she confess?" "No," I said. "She revealed." "To what end?" "To none," I answered. "She sought a witness, not an absolution." The detective nodded slowly. "Will you testify?" "I already have." I stepped outside. The air was cold, but it tasted clean. Across the street, church bells began to ring noon. and for the first time since the suitcase, I did not think of water. I thought of breath. He was still alive. And she, despite calculation, despite abandonment, would carry that knowledge into every sleepless night, not haunted, but reminded that even emptiness cannot undo what life insists upon becoming. The courthouse smelled of varnished wood and winter air. I sat in the second row, hands folded in my lap, listening to the shuffle of papers and murmured names. The child's case, my grandson's case, was listed as Custodial Petition 14B, a cold designation for something born of blood, terror, and breath. Marissa was not present. She had vanished again. No dramatic escape, no police sirens, just absence. They had held her for questioning, long enough to document instability, but not long enough to charge. Without a declared crime or formal accusation, she had been released, and now she was gone. Into buses, trains, motels, or the kind of silence that swallows desperate people whole. Some would call it injustice. I called it inevitability. The law catches what stands still. She, despite her emptiness, could still run. The judge, a woman with gray hair pinned neatly at the nape, scanned the room. "Mrs. Yvonne Hayes," she called. I rose. My knees did not tremble. I approached the stand, took the oath, and sat. "Mrs. Hayes," she began, "you are petitioning for temporary guardianship of the infant boy found near Northwood Lake." "Yes." "You claim him as your biological grandson." "I do." My voice was steady, not forceful. "There has been DNA confirmation," she noted, glancing at the folder. "You were the one who located him and alerted emergency services." "Yes." "Has the child's mother contacted you since?" I looked straight ahead. "She has." "Will you disclose her whereabouts?" "I cannot. I do not know where she is." The judge studied me. Silence held the room. Advocates, clerks, and strangers waited, their faces unreadable. Finally, she leaned forward. "Mrs. Hayes, are you seeking custody out of grief for your son?" "No," I said. "Out of guilt?" "No." "What compels you to take on this responsibility at your age?" I did not rush. The words needed space to exist. "He survived," I said simply. "He survived what no child should. I am not seeking to claim him. I am seeking to protect him. As long as he is unclaimed by safety, I will not release him to chance." A murmur moved through the courtroom. Not surprise, recognition. The judge nodded, carefully. "We do not yet have a legal determination of maternal rights or abandonment. Until such time, this court cannot terminate the mother's claim, but we cannot return him to a missing party." She looked directly at me. "Therefore, temporary custody will be granted to you, Mrs. Hayes, under state supervision, monthly reviews, home inspections, legal monitoring." I bowed my head slightly. "I accept." "This is not final," she warned. "This child's future is not yet secured." "I know." "Your petition for adoption," she added softly, "is premature." "I understand." She tapped the papers once. "Then may your strength match your intention. Temporary custody is awarded to the petitioner." The gavel struck. No applause, no celebration, just the acknowledgement of an unfinished road. Outside, snow had begun to fall, light, tentative, unsure if it should commit to covering the ground. I walked down the courthouse steps alone. No one approached. No one congratulated me. That was how it should be. This was not a victory. This responsibility was extended. I paused at the last step, letting the cold air fill my lungs. Somewhere out there, Marissa walked in the same season, threaded through crowds unnoticed. I tried, briefly, to summon hatred, but I could not. Instead, I felt something far more unsettling: pity. Not the soft pity of strangers, but the heavy pity of knowing someone has lost not just their way, but their compass, their map, their desire to return. I should hate her, I thought, but I pity a soul that has become its own absence. Back home, the house felt different, not warmer, but less haunted by waiting. The crib stood in the corner of the room that once belonged to Matthew. The walls held breath, not memory. He was there, Swaddled, asleep, unaware of courts, gavel strikes, missing mothers, his chest rose and fell, neither hurried nor fragile. I sat beside him. "Temporary," I whispered. "They call you temporary." I reached through the wooden bars and rested a finger lightly against his palm. He curled around it. "I will not call you that." He slept on. There was no triumph in me, no satisfaction, only a sharpened clarity. The law had given me permission. Life has given me purpose. That evening, I prepared tea, though I barely drank it. I set the kettle aside and reached for Raymond's pocket watch, the last gift he ever held. I opened it. It no longer ticked. It no longer needed to. Time is not measured by clocks, I thought, but by what refuses to be undone. On the table lay a single sheet, my first court appointment with child services. Evaluation visit. 2 weeks. They would come. They would judge. They would decide if I were fit to hold grief and hope in the same arms. Let them come. I had already stood at the edge of the lake and chosen not to look away. Before midnight, I stepped outside. Snow kissed my coat. The lake, distant but visible, mirrored a sky heavy with unshed storms. Somewhere out there, she existed. Marissa. Not captured, not redeemed. A walking vacancy. "I do not forgive you," I murmured into the wind, "but I will not chase you." There is a difference between justice and pursuit. I had chosen the first. "I will not hunt you," I said, "but I will outlast you." The wind answered in nothing but silence. I accepted that. Inside, the child stirred. I returned to him, not as avenger, not as a replacement, as witness to a life that had chosen to remain. Temporary, they had said. No, enduring. I used to believe that time ended with the last heartbeat of someone we love. When Matthew died, I thought life folded itself shut, and when Lewis followed him, I was certain the world had no pages left for me to turn. But years have a way of quietly insisting that time goes on, even when we refuse to. It has been 5 winters since the lake. 5 winters since I first saw Hector's lungs struggle against silence. 5 winters since I carried him not as a relic of grief, but as a reason to remain. This morning I woke to the sound of small feet in the hallway, unhurried, soft, certain. The house creaked with the familiar language of age, but it no longer echoed like a mausoleum. It held warmth now, breath, questions. I was sitting in my armchair by the window, a knitted shawl over my shoulders, when he appeared at the doorway, hair tangled from sleep, cheeks flushed with warmth. He no longer toddled. He walked. He talked. "Grandma," he whispered, rubbing his eyes. "Don't leave." I smiled gently. "I'm not going anywhere, love. I'm right here." He crossed the room and climbed into my lap without asking. He fit differently now, no longer weightless like a secret, but solid, rooted, real. He rested his head beneath my chin. "Did you have a bad dream?" I asked. He shook his head. "I dreamed you were gone." I pressed my hand over his heart, as if to remind both of us that we were still here. "I am not gone," I said quietly. "I am right where I need to be." His fingers, curious as ever, brushed against the chain around my neck, the pocket watch of Raymond Hayes, his grandfather. He had asked about it before. "Why do you wear that?" he asked. "To remember time," I answered. He frowned, puzzled. "But time is everywhere." "Not always," I said. "Sometimes we forget it is moving." Gently, I opened the lid for him. The watch, long silent, held no ticking hands, yet I wore it still. "Does it still work?" he asked. I paused. "It does, in its own way." He studied it, as if listening for sounds that only I could hear. There was a time I believed broken things stayed broken. Those clocks that stopped would never tell time again. That love, once lost, remained buried beneath soil no prayer could turn. But then came this child, breathing against fate, unclaimed by death. He lifted his head. "Grandma," he whispered again, "do people disappear forever?" I held his gaze. "Only if we let them." He nodded, perhaps without understanding, but understanding was not required. Presence was. Outside, the wind shook the birch trees, scattering pale leaves against the frozen ground. The same trees that had witnessed tragedy now swayed to the rhythm of resilience. "Tell me a story," he said. "Which one?" "The one about the lake, but not the scary part." I inhaled deeply. I had never told him the full truth, not yet. He knew he had been found, rescued, chosen, but he did not know what. "One day," I said slowly, "when you are ready, I will tell you everything, but today I will tell you this." He rested his chin on his hands. "You were found," I said softly, "not because someone was looking for you. You were found because someone refused to leave." His eyes widened. "You?" I smiled. "Me?" He thought about this. "Did you know I was there?" "No," I answered, but I knew I had to walk toward whatever was calling mercy. He reached for the watch again. "Grandpa's?" "Yes." "Was he brave?" "He was steady," I said. "Sometimes that is braver." Later, after breakfast, he sat at the kitchen table drawing cranes and ships with stubby crayons. I watched him, hands wrapped around a cup of tea. His humming filled the room like a hymn without words, a sound that had never belonged to this house before. There are nights I still wake and think I hear water, the ripple of a case sinking, the gasp of a child surfacing, but then I hear him breathing in the next room, and the dream retreats. Regret asks, "What if I had looked away?" Faith answers, "But you didn't." As the morning lengthened, he clambered into my lap again. Children have a way of knowing when silence has meaning. "Grandma," he said, "what if I go far away when I'm big?" "Then I will wait by the window," I replied, "and if you do not return, I will search. Even if it's dark, especially then." He considered. "And if I forget the way home?" I kissed his forehead. "Homes remember." When he finally ran to the other room, I opened the pocket watch once more. Motionless hands, frozen hour, yet somehow still holding worth. There are things in life that do not move, yet carry us forward. Time, forgiveness, a child's second chance. I closed the watch and held it in my palm, feeling not its ticking but its weight. Some might say all stories need an ending, but mine did not end in the lake, nor in the courthouse, nor in her absence. It continued, in breath, in warmth, in the steady thud of a boy's heart against mine. I once believed I had nothing left to give, but life is not done with us simply because we are done with hope. Some clocks do not tick, they endure, and some loves do not roar, they remain. I have been told that silence is a weakness, that those who do not shout are submissive, that those who walk away are defeated, but life has taught me something different, something I wish to offer to whoever finds these words. Not everyone who is quiet is broken. Some of us are quiet because we are guarding something fragile, something unfinished, something still breathing. Years have passed since the night I stood at the edge of Northwood Lake, my hands shaking, my heart splintering beneath the weight of what I found. People often ask me how I kept going after so much loss. After burying a husband, then a son, after facing betrayal, judgment, suspicion. I do not have a heroic answer, simply did not leave. That is all. I stayed. Not because I was unafraid, but because something in me refused to let the story end in water. If you are listening now, wherever you are, whoever you are, you may know something of this. You may have endured a silence no one believed. You may have carried truths others called delusion. You may have seen cruelty behind a smile or danger behind a closed door, and no one listened. I know that loneliness, the loneliness of being the only witness to what should never be forgotten. So let me say this to you. You are not foolish for seeing what others refuse to see. You are not cruel for refusing to pretend. And if you have ever protected something, someone, without applause or acknowledgement, then you are stronger than those who ever raised their voices against you. I once believed I had reached my ending, that I had already lost everything worth saving, but fate handed me a choice not wrapped in glory or romance, but in cold, sodden leather, a brown suitcase sinking beneath a gray lake. Inside it, I found a question. Will you turn away knowing no one will blame you? Or will you reach into the darkness knowing no one will thank you? I chose to reach. Not because I am righteous, but because I could not live with the knowledge that something innocent had been abandoned to silence. Maybe you have faced a choice like that. Maybe you are facing it now. And maybe, like me, you fear you are not strong enough. Let me offer you this truth. The one I learned in the aftermath, in the hospitals, in the courts, in the cold echo of an empty doorway. Strength is not something we summon. It is something revealed when love demands we remain. There are nights when I still wake before dawn, long before the rest of the world draws breath. I walk through my house, a house once held hostage by grief, and I listen. For footsteps, for laughter, for small hands tugging at the sleeve of my robe, and I whisper to myself, "This is real. We made it here. We survived the unthinkable." You may be walking through a night of your own, a night where truth feels heavier than hope. If so, listen to an old woman when I say, do not measure strength by noise. Do not mistake gentleness for surrender. Do not assume those who walk away from cruelty have retreated. Some of us are simply walking toward what still deserves to live. I do not tell this story to be praised. I tell it to bear witness. To every person who has ever stood alone, doubted their own memories, questioned their worth because someone else insisted their pain was imaginary. This is for you. I did not rescue a child because I was fearless. I rescued him because I could still feel fear. Fear of doing nothing. Fear of letting the world remain unchanged. Fear of becoming silent in the wrong direction. If you have ever carried that kind of fear, know this: it is not your weakness. It is the birthplace of your courage. I will not pretend that justice is simple. The woman who abandoned him, she walks somewhere in this world, or perhaps she does not. I do not know. I do not chase her. I do not curse her. I have seen what hollowness does to a human soul. There are punishments deeper than prisons. Her absence is one. My life is no longer entwined with hers. That is not forgiveness. It is released. I choose to leave her on time. The same time that shattered me has now begun to rebuild me, grain by grain, breath by breath. If you have stayed until now listening to an old voice recount the weight of water and the mercy of breath, then let me leave you with one final echo, the one I keep closest when doubt returns. There are things that go on, even when we believe they have ended. Love, courage, second chances, and yes, healing. Not the loud kind wrapped in applause, the quiet kind stitched through ordinary mornings, through teacups and bedtime whispers, through a child saying, "Don't leave." If you have ever been called weak for staying gentle, speak now. If you have ever carried the truth no one else could see, speak now. If someone once tried to drown your story in disbelief, tell me, in the quiet below this voice, would you have opened the suitcase? I ask not to judge, but to listen, because somewhere out there, another heart may be waiting for your answer.